Hello, welcome to Slow Night's Ancient Tales, here to guide you toward peaceful rest at the close of a busy day. Tonight's tale is The Dream of Joshin by author Kim Dong-in. Set in the ancient kingdom of Silla, it follows a young monk named Joshin who falls deeply in love with a woman. Through a long, exhausting dream that lasts only a single night, he discovers the fleeting nature of life and awakens to a profound truth. Perhaps the many worries and blind attachments we carry in our waking lives are just as faint and passing as Joshin's dream. So gently set down your tangled thoughts and the heavy burdens of your heart into the quiet, comforting darkness of this deep night. Lean into the calm of my voice, find your most comfortable position, and let your eyes slowly close. Now, let us begin tonight's story. Dong-in's Historical Tales 2, The Dream of Joshin, by Kim Dong-in. Ding dong. Listening to the sound of the temple bell echoing through the quiet sky, Joshin descended from Naksan Temple and headed toward his workplace, the farm estate. It was a spring day. The rose of Sharon, boasting the golden age of Silla, was in full bloom, decorating the mountains, fields, and plains with the deeply beautiful season. The wide plains of Nari County in Myeongju were busy with farming preparations. All the farmlands scattered across that vast plain belonged to Siddal Temple. Joshin was the estate manager, specially dispatched to oversee, manage, and govern the farms of that temple. While walking toward his quarters, cheerfully looking over this wide area under his jurisdiction, Joshin suddenly stopped in his tracks. Stopping abruptly, he froze as if he had been carved into a statue right there. Where his eyes were directed, there sat a beautiful young woman beneath a blooming peach tree, singing a song to herself. She was 17 or 18 years old, with skin like jade, radiant eyes, and thick, lustrous hair. Truly a girl as beautiful as a celestial maiden. Although he was a Buddhist monk, Joshin was still a young man. He stood there like someone who had lost his soul, simply staring at her. The young woman seemed to notice that Joshin was looking at her. Her head slowly turned toward him. Her eyes slowly lifted. She looked back at Joshin with large, radiant eyes. Had she looked at him for even a moment longer, Joshin might have fainted on the spot from sheer excitement. Fortunately, after looking at him briefly, she frowned for a moment, then stood up as if annoyed. After brushing herself off, she walked away. Without thinking, Joshin followed her. He did not know why he followed her. He merely followed her as if in a dream. The young woman reached the gate of the house of Lord Kim Hun, the governor of the region, looked back one more time, and then disappeared inside. Why did she look back again? This weighed heavily on Joshin's mind. Why did she look back again at the gate? Did she look back out of annoyance and disgust? Or was there another meaning hidden in it? Perhaps she had simply looked back without any thought at all. However, the fact that she had looked back one more time lingered in his mind so much that he could not control himself. After standing blankly for a long while, staring at the gate where she had vanished, Joshin gathered his senses. He spotted an old woman selling rice cakes nearby and asked her who the young woman was. The old woman smiled knowingly. "She is the young lady of the governor's house." "Has she been engaged yet?" "Ah, could there be such a beautiful woman in the world?" "She is of marriageable age, so hasn't she been engaged somewhere?" "I don't know that for sure." There was nothing more to ask. He had a mountain of questions he wanted to ask, but he could not bring himself to speak. Caught in an agonizing torment that seemed to tear his heart apart, the young monk became almost like a madman. The image of Lady Kim lingering vividly before his eyes, whether they were closed or open. At night, he could not sleep peacefully. The image of the maiden looking down modestly and embroidering under the blooming peach flowers that day, her radiant eyes that slowly rolled toward him, and the gaze she gave when she looked back once more at the gate of her house, were all so vivid that his mind could not settle for even a moment. He aimlessly circled the walls of the governor's house. Hoping there might be a time when Lady Kim would come out again, he stood hiding far away, gazing at the gate, waiting for a day that was not promised. Every day he went and sat a few times in the exact spot under the peach tree where the maiden had sat, silently enjoying the space she had occupied. The peach blossoms that had bloomed that day gradually fell, replaced by fresh green leaves decorating the tall branches, preparing for the day when the pea-sized peaches would turn red. Joshin looked up at this with an endlessly lonely heart. As days passed and as months passed, Joshin's heart fluttered more, grew more anxious, and burned even brighter. Why did the maiden come outside that day? And if she did, why did she have to catch his eye? And if she caught his eye, why was his heart fluttering so much? Also, having come out once, why did she not come out a second time? Because his heart fluttered so much, he felt too embarrassed to ask anyone else. So Joshin burned with longing all alone, aimlessly wandering around the governor's house. Spring passed, and summer arrived. That summer, too, passed before he knew it, and autumn came. Yet Joshin never got another chance to see Lady Kim. He aimlessly wandered around her house every day, but she never revealed herself outside the gate again. With his burning youth and an aching heart he could not soothe, Joshin finally had no choice but to rely on the power of the Buddha. From the next day on, Joshin's haggard figure appeared daily at the Hall of Great Compassion in Naksan Temple. With his hands pressed together, his eyes closed, and rubbing his prayer beads, he offered his prayers to the Buddha. O great and compassionate Buddha, please allow Lady Kim, the daughter of the governor, to become my wife. Chanting Namu Amita Bul, he offered this sincere prayer before the Buddha. Joshin had entered the Buddhist priesthood in his childhood and had been praying and offering blessings for 20 years, but he had never put as much devotion into a prayer as he did now. Day and night, he knelt neatly before the Buddha, praying with a single mind and a single devotion. Please give the daughter of the governor to this humble monk. Autumn swiftly passed, winter slipped by, and a new spring arrived. Even until then, Joshin was offering his prayers to the Buddha with a single-minded devotion. A new spring arrived in the world. The rose of Sharon bloomed fully across the land of Silla once again, and the peach blossoms bloomed fully over the lawn where Lady Kim had sat embroidering one spring day last year, boasting the colors of spring. Yet Joshin, the master of a bitter heart, locked himself in the main hall of Naksan Temple, exclusively praying to the Buddha with an unwavering mind. That spring passed, then summer, autumn, and winter. Another year passed, and another year, and yet another, until 4 years had silently flowed by since Joshin first saw Lady Kim. Joshin spent that long time single-mindedly yearning for one maiden, offering devoted prayers before the Buddha. However, there was no miraculous response to these sincere prayers. Whether the Buddha disapproved of his prayers, or whether it was because Joshin and Lady Kim were simply not meant for each other, the Buddha remained entirely deaf to his earnest pleas. Still, Joshin did not give up just because his prayers lacked a miraculous answer. He intended to persistently press his case with all his devotion until a sign was shown. While passing in front of a well one day, a conversation between two old women drawing water struck Joshin's ears. The governor surely welcomed a fine son-in-law. Indeed, for that young lady, that son-in-law is a match made in heaven. Governor? Son-in-law? At these words that carelessly drifted into his ears, Joshin stopped dead in his tracks. His vision went dark. His body swayed. Joshin staggered over to the well. "Excuse me, ma'am." "Oh, Master Monk, how are you? Why does your complexion look so poor lately?" Joshin could not engage in small talk. "Has Lady Kim married?" "Master Monk, you live in the same village, and you mean to say you didn't know yet when it's already been so long? This is the first I'm hearing of it. It's already been 3 months. I hear they have great marital bliss, too." Joshin could not listen to the rest of the old man's chattering. Leaving the surprised old woman staring at his back, Joshin fled the scene as if running away. The first emotion that gripped him was endless despair. Were his 4 years of devotion all for nothing? Had Lady Kim finally become someone else's? Clutching a chest that wanted to wail loudly because of this despair, Joshin trudged out of the streets and returned to Naksan Temple. But as he walked back, a new emotion arose in his heart, anger toward the Buddha. Endless rage exploded in his chest against the Buddha who had completely ignored his 4 years of devotion. If the Buddha had no spiritual power, there was no value in serving him. If he did not recognize devotion, there was no need to serve him. It infuriated him that he had offered his devotion for 4 years, hoping against hope, to this useless Buddha. Joshin arrived at Naksan Temple, panting heavily. As soon as he arrived, he dashed straight into the main hall. Upon entering, he saw the candle he had lit with devotion earlier was still flickering. Joshin planted his feet firmly and stood directly facing the Buddha, his face distorted with bitter resentment, his limbs trembling. The Buddha statue was kicked by Joshin and tilted to the side. "So, you bastard, you steal my devotion? Spiritual power? What spiritual power could a thing like you have? I am a fool. 4 years I was deceived by you." Being in the quiet, empty main hall, he could no longer hold it in. Joshin collapsed right there. He collapsed and wailed loudly. It felt as if the whole world had collapsed before his eyes. Pouring out all at once the tears that had been rising in his throat since he heard the tragic news by the well, he wailed while pounding the floor with his fists. After crying and crying and crying, an exhausted Joshin fell over right there and drifted into a deep sleep. "Hello, hello," a sound heard as if in a dream. A soft hand gently shook Joshin's shoulder. Joshin woke up with a start. When he opened his eyes, what did he see? Joshin sat up. Even after sitting up, he could not speak, just blinking his eyes blankly. Right in front of his eyes sat Lady Kim, whom he had desperately yearned for over the past 4 years. "Ah, ah!" He was almost like a mute. "Master Monk," Lady Kim bowed her head deeply. "Ah, what brings you here? Master Monk, please forgive me. Ever since the day I first saw you, I lived as if in a dream for those 4 years, and though I was married off by the strict orders of my parents. Lady Kim, I have escaped and fled here now. Please accept me." "Ah, Kim, ah." No words would come out. Was this a dream? If it was a dream, let him never wake up. Tears simply rained down from Joshin's eyes. In that moment of overwhelming emotion, even when he opened his mouth, no words emerged. From that evening on, Joshin's shadow vanished entirely from the Nari County area. The next day, Joshin and his wife appeared in Joshin's hometown. They secured a small, wretched hut and made their nest of love there. Though he had once been so angry that he cursed the Buddha, now that Lady Kim had entered his embrace, he considered this too to be the Buddha's grace. So even though Joshin had returned to secular life, his devotion to the Buddha was rekindled. "Dear, yes, what is it?" The young couple would look at each other and smile brightly. It was like a dream. It was like a dream. To have the woman he had yearned for day and night for 4 years now sitting in his house, calling her his wife, made Joshin's heart feel as if it had soared to the heavens. It was a meager life of living hand to mouth. If they did not go out and earn in the morning, they had nothing to eat the next day. Yet they were satisfied with this life. Having a loving wife, having a loving husband, hardship did not feel like hardship, and poverty did not feel like poverty. Everything was simply joyful and delightful. When he returned home, with an exhausted body after working all day to secure the next day's living expenses, his body felt tired to the bone, but his heart would flutter with hope. Imagining the figure of his wife waiting at home, he would smile all the way to his door, where his young wife would step outside to wait and welcome him in. "How tired are you?" "Tired? Not at all from such simple work." His young, pretty wife would respond to these casually tossed words with a smile. What did a day's exhaustion matter? When he met this smile, it vanished without a trace like frost under the sun. "Dear, yes? About that time in the past. When is that time you speak of? Oh, come on, that time. Oh, come on, when was that time? Oh, you! Ha ha ha, go ahead and tell me. Why did you look back at the gate and then just go inside? Then what was I supposed to do, not go inside? You could have said at least one word. How scandalous! Why couldn't you say anything? Well, wasn't I a monk? Weren't you an unmarried maiden?" The young couple enjoyed reminiscing about their first meeting in days gone by. "Dear, can you imagine how anxious I was for 4 years? I was a monk, and you were the young lady of the governor's house. Do you know how much my heart burned and ached when I was stubbornly begging the Buddha to grant this impossible wish? Still, you were a man, so you could roam around freely. I couldn't even go outside, just stuck indoors, boiling inside all by myself." The young couple, revisiting the lovesickness of 4 years past. Watching the playful affection of this pair of lovebirds, the village maidens and bachelors would sigh, the young widows would feel restless, the grandmothers would whisper, and the old men would laugh. Thus, The happy days they had only hoped for in dreams flowed quietly, quietly by. Time flowed and flowed. Because they had yearned for each other for 4 years, it was as sweet as honey at first. But the bitter world of reality did not hesitate even for this young couple. 1 year passed, then 2 years, and for 3, 4, 5, or 6 years, the intense thrill of their love continued. However, as they passed that period of tension, the bitterness of reality gradually began to threaten the young couple's life. It was a life of eating only what they earned that day. If for some reason they could not earn a day's wage, they had no choice but to skip their meals the very next day. A person's body is not made of iron, so there were times when they fell ill. Since the weather was not something people could control, there were days they could not go out to work. When this happened, they had to starve miserably. At first, even if they had to starve, the tension of their love was still abundant, so starving was not so painful. But as that tension loosened, irritation gradually began to set in. "Dear, we are starving today. What can we do? I know there's nothing we can do, but isn't it pitiful? It's already been 3 days. Even if 3 days become 10 days, what can I do unless I can get up? What do you want me to do when my body aches? It was a misfortune that we met. You should have stayed as the manager of Siddal Temple, and I should have become the daughter-in-law of the Choi family. What madness possessed me to run away?" Their lives became so precarious that the wife would sometimes voice such unpleasant complaints in front of her sick husband. Had he learned at least how to farm early on, he might have achieved some stability in life, but Joshin, who had served the Buddha since childhood, did not know how to farm. Furthermore, his body was not very strong. Since he couldn't farm, doing odd jobs was his only means of survival. But with a weak body on top of that, it was truly a life of starving 9 meals out of 10. The starving, shivering couple had now lost the intense passion of their newlywed days, and they swam through this sea of hardship, starving and eating day by day. With frail bodies, there were only the two of them, yet they couldn't even manage to feed those 2 mouths, so eventually, both had to go out and work. The wife took in laundry, did sewing, and performed all sorts of difficult tasks. The husband also did every kind of work he had the strength for. However, with the pennies they earned, they could not save anything. In winter, they trembled in rags, surviving on porridge instead of rice, struggling desperately to keep their lives going. Meanwhile, their ages crossed 30 and then 40. 30 years had passed since they met. By then, they had become an old couple with graying hair. During that time, they had 5 children. Starting with their eldest, who was 15, 5 children huddled closely by their side. Even when there were only 2 of them, feeding themselves was difficult. Now, trying to feed a family of 7, it was hard enough just to put paste in their mouths. Around the break of dawn, the old couple would split up and go out to work. They would only barely return as evening fell. After the parents left to work, the 5 children guarded the cramped, dark, gloomy hut with hollow eyes. From the crying baby begging for food to the slightly older eldest child, everyone clutched their hungry stomachs, waiting for the rice their parents would bring back. The couple would return to their so-called home as the day darkened. Yet exhausted as they were, they had no energy to exchange words. They would silently devour the watery porridge boiled up for them, and as soon as they finished, they crawled into bed and fell asleep. Then the next day, before the sun even rose, they would go out to work again. For several years, this couple had never shared a real conversation. If they managed to speak, it was only in irritation. Sometimes, when his work didn't go well, Joshin would sit blankly on the street and reflect on the past. When he took the person he so deeply missed and loved as his wife, could he have ever dreamed that a miserable day like today would come? He believed the joyful dream, like a spring garden, would last forever into the future. Sitting here today, with his once black hair turned fully white, looking back at the past, it could only end with the single word, impermanence. True, for a while after they married, it was joyful and fun. But how many days did that joyful period actually last? The crushing poverty that followed. Fighting viciously just to survive until his black hair turned white over 40 years, he never once had the chance to slowly enjoy life. And during that time, the little ones that kept popping up. One appeared, then two, then three, four, five, in the blink of an eye, until now it was hard just to find 3 meals in a month. Where had his wife's once pretty figure vanished to? Where had that once joyful life disappeared? A dream. It was a dream. Wouldn't it have been much better to spend a peaceful life serving the Buddha as the manager of Sedal Temple? Sitting blankly and thinking these thoughts, tears would fall endlessly from his old eyes. Eventually, they decided to abandon their hometown and leave for another place. They didn't think their lives would drastically improve no matter where they went, but hoping that perhaps another place might be slightly better, they packed their meager belongings on their backs and heads, left their hometown, and set out on a journey with no destination. The parents carried one child each on their backs and dragged the other 3 children along by the hand. The old husband carried a child on his back and walked silently in the lead. About 3 or 4 paces behind, the old wife also carried a child on her back and walked silently. Holding hands, the 3 children followed behind them. They didn't exchange a single word. They wandered their drifting path, barely surviving by taking turns, the husband eating a spoonful of begged rice at one door, the wife eating a spoonful at the next, and the children eating somewhere else. Unluckily, when they failed to find houses, it was common for them to starve for 3 days. "Dad, I'm hungry. Mom, my legs hurt. They must be hungry. Their legs must ache." But they had to keep going, even if hungry and in pain, to find a house, and they had to find a house just to get a mouthful of food. That was their fate, having to walk on despite the hunger, having to walk on despite the pain. At night, they slept in the fields. Were there sleeping mats? Were there blankets? With the sky as their blanket, the ground as their mat, and stones as their pillows, the family of 7 would collapse in exhaustion, clutching their starved stomachs, and sleep. One autumn day, their wandering footsteps reached Hayon Pass. They needed to cross this pass before the day was out, but the sun had already begun to set behind the western mountains. "Come on, let's hurry." The old husband walked ahead. They hadn't found a house for a while, so it was their 4th day starving. They had managed to get the 3 younger children a little water to wet their throats, but the 15-year-old eldest and the old couple had only filled their stomachs with spring water. As they tried to cross the mountain pass, they had no strength left in their legs, feeling like collapsing with every step. But if they didn't cross this pass, the family of 7 would simply starve to death right there. So squeezing out strength they didn't have and pushing themselves with pure desperation, they began to climb the steep pass. But they hadn't gone far when the eldest son called out, "Father." It was a voice with absolutely no energy, but the father didn't even look back. "Keep moving. Father, let's rest for just a moment. Keep moving." He just kept walking. After walking a bit further, he looked back, but his son was nowhere to be seen. "Hey," he called out, but there was no answer. "Where did this boy go?" "I don't know. He was exhausted, so he's probably taking a rest," the wife replied. "Kids, where did your brother go?" "We don't know." The old father clicked his tongue. He put down the child he was carrying and muttered, "Damn kids." Grumbling curses, he retraced his steps back down the path. After going down a bit, he saw his son lying face down in the exact spot where he had asked his father to rest earlier. "Hey!" There was no answer. The father moved closer. He nudged his son's hip with his foot. "Hey!" Still, there was no answer. His heart sank. He lifted his son's head, only to find that his son was already no longer a person of this world. "You fool! Hey, wake up! It's food!" he shouted, but the boy's eyes would never open again, because the husband went down and didn't come back up. The wife dragged the other children and followed him down. The old couple couldn't say a word. They only looked at each other's faces. Tears continuously streamed from their old eyes. Eventually, the wife spoke first. "He starved to death." The husband tossed back an answer to that. "Starved? He drank 2 bowls of cold water just this morning." The wife understood the hidden meaning behind her husband's answer. Knowing this, she simply turned her head back to her son's pitiful corpse. "Anyway, we can't leave him like this. We have to bury him, even if it's just by the roadside." "Why did this have to happen? It is what it is." "What do you mean, it is what it is?" Regardless, the road ahead was urgent. A dead child is a dead child, but if they delayed here, who knew what would happen to those who still barely had breath left in them? Using what little strength they had, they dug a hole there and buried the boy's body. Because the journey was urgent, they set off again, but their feet were heavy. The husband kept sniffing continuously as if annoyed, walking ahead without looking back, while the wife kept looking back, and looking back as she climbed the mountain. The wandering continued. This group of 6, continuing their drift here and there with ragged bodies and starved stomachs, faced an even greater hardship when they reached Ugok County. Both the husband and wife fell ill at the same time. Because it was an illness born from old age, lack of clothing, and starvation, it was not something that could be cured quickly. What should we do? They were now completely exhausted by the mere act of living. We have no choice but to build a shack and pass the winter here. They gathered scraps of wood and straw mats from here and there, haphazardly building a small shack. Anyway, they now had a shack they could shelter in. The shack was built, but with both parents collapsed in bed, how were the 6 of them going to eat? There was no other way. Hey, you go out and beg for some food. The 10-year-old girl had no choice but to grab a basket and head out. What could a mere 10-year-old girl possibly manage to bring back? For a family of no small number, 6 people. Inside the shack, loosely wrapped in straw mats, the sick old couple lay lethargically, suffering. The 3 young children huddled together, shivering uncontrollably. Up in the sky there was the sun, and on the ground there was grain. However, this pitiful family, unable to bathe in any of these natural blessings, spent day after day merely imagining the amount of food their 10-year-old girl might bring back in her basket. The couple still didn't exchange any words. Talking only brought irritation, and they had completely exhausted the energy to even be irritated. Though they lay side by side, they didn't look at each other, as if they were people from different countries. The 3 young children, well aware of their circumstances, didn't whine, they just sniffled silently. Inside this shack, the rustling sounds of people could be heard, but the sound of people talking was never heard. A life that had forgotten laughter and conversation. It had already been decades since the shadow of a smile had been seen on the faces of this family, and a smile had not appeared since. Ah, it's cold. Even in a winter where passers-by wrapped in thick clothes would complain of the cold, not even a sound of complaining about the cold was heard in this shack. They laid a straw mat on the bare earth and covered themselves with another straw mat, barely enduring the cold, but their fingers and toes felt like they were falling off. Yet, whether adult or child, no one spoke. They merely endured the cold in silence. Trembling like aspen leaves, they only let out faint groans of, "Ah, ah!" On one such winter day, another tragedy struck this dark shack. The young girl, who had gone out with her begging basket to get food, returned home after being bitten on the thigh by a village dog. In her terror, she had sprinted all the way back. She burst into the shack like a bullet. But upon entering and collapsing, she couldn't move at all. Ouch! She just began to let out weak groans. "Father, I think I'm going to die. Mom, please save me." These weak groans forced out word by word. But what could be done? The father she called out to, the mother she called out to, were both bedridden themselves, and below them were only helpless children of 8, 6, and 4 years old. The girl continued her weak groaning all night long. Only toward dawn did the groaning stop. Assuming she had fallen asleep because the groaning stopped, the father reached out and touched her, only to find the girl's body was already as cold as a block of ice. "Hey, hey, hey!" He called out and shook her, but there could be no answer. On the bright morning of the next day, the old wife gathered herself and sat up. "Dear, what is it?" It was the first time they had called each other in a long while. Thinking about it carefully, "We need to find another way now." At these serious words, the husband tilted his bird. "Tell me what you're thinking." "When we first met, you and I were both in the prime of our youth, and our life together was fun and exciting, wasn't it? If we got one tasty dish, we shared it. We enjoyed warm beds together. It was truly a sweet and happy life, wasn't it? I thought ours was a good match, with deep affection and love over the 30 years we've been together. But unexpectedly falling ill, and our bodies growing weak, We are now suffering from severe hunger and cold, even enduring the shame of begging at other people's doors. Since our lives have become like this, with my stomach empty and the children's stomachs empty, and having no time but to try to fill them, when do we ever have the leisure to enjoy each other's company and converse together? Laughter is a dream of the past, conversation is a dream of the past, and now I have become a burden to you, and you have become a burden to me. Since things have already come to this, thinking about it again, when will there ever be another joyful day in our future? Meeting and parting are common things in human life. Cutting off this temporary bond and parting ways from each other seems like it would lighten our burdens. What do you think? The husband could not answer for a long while. After sitting with his head bowed for a long time, just breathing heavily, he raised his head. It can't be helped. Let's treat the past 30 years as a dream and each go our separate ways. Of our 5 children, we lost 2. Let's divide the remaining 3. You take 1, I'll take 2, and leave each other. Yes, it seems like the rambling of old people who don't have much longer to live anyway, but what can we do about the cold and hunger right in front of our eyes? I will return to our hometown, so you head south. Thus, finalizing the account of 30 years of shared joys and sorrows, the old couple parted ways there, heading north and south. Watching the pitiful sight of his wife walking north, dragging a child by the hand, exposing her sick body to the harsh winter wind, Joshin stood there and cried endlessly. Startled by the sound of his own groaning, Joshin woke up with a jolt. He couldn't gather his senses for a while. Only after looking around frantically for a long time did he finally understand his surroundings. I am still a single man. The 30 years of married life with Lady Kim was nothing but a dream. After hearing the rumor that Lady Kim had married, he had rushed to the main hall, wailed loudly, and fallen into an exhausted sleep, during which he had a very long dream. The first thought that struck his mind as he understood his surroundings was the fact that he was still single. He is still single. It was all a dream. Joshin sprang to his feet. He hurriedly righted the Buddha statue that he had kicked aside earlier. Then Joshin bowed down before it. I understand, because this foolish human did not know that the world was such a bitter and painful place. I prayed for 4 years to go there. I have only now finally realized your high intention, loving this foolish human enough to prevent my silly prayer from coming true. Please forgive me, and please guide and teach this foolish human until the very end. Joshin was genuinely moved to tears by the Buddha's love, teaching him through that long dream in order to awaken his foolish self. Deep into the night, in front of the candle still flickering from when he had prayed to have Lady Kim given to him, Joshin, now with the eyes of his mind opened, bowed down and worshipped reverently again and again. The next day, Joshin trekked up Haeyeon Pass. Relying on his memory, he went to find the spot where he had buried his eldest son in the dream. When he dug up the spot where he had buried his son in the dream, a stone Maitreya Buddha emerged from the ground. Finding this, Joshin washed the Maitreya cleanly, brought it back to the temple, and enshrined it. After that, he immediately packed his belongings, hit the road, and went up to the capital. I will resign from my duties as a state manager. After returning to Sedal Temple and submitting his resignation to the head monk, Joshin left Sedal Temple and founded a new temple, Jongtosa, in a place with clear waters and beautiful mountains. Having seen the futile and vain nature of human life early on in a dream, Joshin lived the rest of his life peacefully devoted to Buddhism, never again caught up in worldly attachments. How did you enjoy the long overnight dream of Joshin, which captured all the joys, sorrows, and the cycle of life? Just as Joshin awoke from his dream, shook off his worldly agonies, and finally attained deep peace of mind, I hope that today's heavy worries pressing down on your shoulders will turn out to be nothing but a light dream that scatters away by tomorrow morning. Now, leave behind all lingering attachments and thoughts, and I hope you fall into the warmest, deepest sleep. You did a great job today. Good night.